So Jeremy, how can limited time impact the workplace?
Limited time impacts a lot of workplaces. For instance, mine, I only have so many days to train people. In fact, I've only got 3 weeks and I have to fit everything into that time frame.
For them to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So that's your example of when you've been in that situation is 3 weeks to train people on how to do their job.
Yep. Every month I get a new class and I have 3 weeks to train them and make sure that it works.
Okay. So when you're in that situation, do you read and adapt to the situation well?
It seems so, from the feedback that I've gotten, as well as from the grades of the people who have to test out of the class. It's gone really well so far.
Okay. Can you think of how you could have read and adapted to the situation better?
I have done that in the past where I've looked at it and thought, okay, how could I have done this better based on either their scores or the student's comprehension of what's going on or how they do when they're actually out and doing their job. And yeah, every time I have to figure out, is there something better I can do with it?
So you go off of being with the students and seeing how they've integrated what you've taught them and
Integration, their feedback, as well as how well they actually do for their job. Yep.
Okay. So you being in this situation is going to happen. How often do you get new classes?
It happens every month.
Oh, so every month you're in this situation. Okay. So what options do you have the next one and how will you adapt?
So the options I have for the next one, at the end of every new class that I have, I ask everybody for their feedback. Is there anything that I could have done differently? I usually have a week until the next class, so I will go out and observe and see how they do, how they did on their testing with me, and then I try to change and think, okay, is there anything that they should know better than the next time, or is there anything that's new that's more relevant for the next time? But always trying to get feedback from both their management as well as the students themselves.
So I like that idea to not only get feedback from the students, but also those who are supervising over them. That's great. Okay, so how can too much work impact the workplace?
How can too much work? See this all the time with people who are either they burn themselves out because they are just constantly swamped with work, or it's not a fun environment. You've got to find a way to mix in something in there that's more fun than just work all the time. Otherwise, people lose motivation, productivity goes down, and you have people that ultimately don't want to stay there anymore, so they leave because they get really sick of all work all the time.
Okay. Can you think of an example when you have been in this situation?
When I've been in that situation, yeah. In fact, at one point, the position that I started in, it was a lot of work all the time, and I thought I want to move around somewhere because I don't want to do this anymore.
Okay.
And something else came up, so I moved to that instead.
So do you feel like you read and adapted to that situation well?
The situation that I was in, yeah, I'd say I adapted quite well because the moment a better, higher up position came up, I was able to go for it and I got the position because I had been able to adapt and grow.
That's awesome. Is there any other way you feel like you could have adapted to it better?
Oh yeah, there's always ways of adapting better or in a different way. Hindsight is 20/20. I could have studied differently. I could have learned differently. I could have even gone for a different position if I'd wanted to.
Okay.
Or I could have stayed there and been miserable.
So can you anticipate being in that same position again with too much work? And when do you think that would be likely to happen?
And I have been in that position since then, and it's one of those where I had to take a step back and realize that I was just pushing work all the time, and I wasn't really giving myself a rest from it, and I just needed to take a mental breather. So I had to, whether it was taking a day off of work or just realizing that I needed to pause and take those breaks.
So how you adapted was looking inside and finding balance?
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of it was just finding whether I needed to, when work was over, leave work at work, or if it was, hey, take a day off. But I had to check internally, is it something where I am just tired of this, or is it something where maybe it was just for a day or something? But yeah, definitely checking internally with your balances.
Okay. So the options you have when you turn inward, you also have to take into consideration the culture of work? Is what I need to do to find balance acceptable within the company?
Well, that's always the case because different companies allow different things.
Mm-hmm.
With the balances that I was seeking, I had to go through and figure out what is okay with the company, what's not, how is this going to work, because as I said, every company is different with what they're going to allow and with what the breaks may be.
Yeah. Okay. So how can other people not doing their part impact the workplace?
I've actually seen this a lot because the people I train have certain criteria that they have to meet. They've got to be able to handle their workload, because if they don't, it shifts onto everybody else, and everybody else then has to take care of that. And it creates not only cranky coworkers because you're not doing your job, it overloads them at that same time. So if you're not doing your job, it pushes it off to everybody else who's already doing their job plus some of yours.
So it sounds like you've already experienced that and have an example in mind of when that happens.
I've had that a few times where I've had to shoulder that myself, or I've seen it happen and it was highly regrettable that it was going on and we had to figure out a way to fix it. So
Yeah. So did you feel you read and adapted to the situation well?
that one, and that was the hard part. The first time I saw that, it was due to decisions that had been made that I realized that I had to grow and adapt from and change. After that, it was, yep, here's better ways to grow and adapt to this. And I mean, there's always learning to be done, but it's just a matter of, okay, is there a faster way of getting this taken care of? Because the faster you get it done, the faster everybody gets back to their normal work.
So I hear you saying when I was going to ask if you could have read and adapted to it better, it sounds like you just answered that question, is you could have looked back, assessed, and
I had to do that
Yes.
before it was one of the decisions. It was, I realized, hey, I need to change and adapt from this in the best way possible because it was creating issues. So changing and adapting from there has worked fairly well so far, but there's always new little challenges that pop up that you've still got to learn how to make it even better from, because
Okay.
change is a constant.
So can you anticipate being in that situation again in the future? I mean, when is that likely to happen?
And that one I have tried to anticipate, okay, when is this going to happen again, or something like it. And it's one where I'm always trying to change more of an anticipatory, not so much a reactionary. So it's, I see this might be coming up, how am I going to change it so it's not like last time? And if it does become like last time, what is the best way to get out of that situation so that it's not causing a problem in the future? So it's more of, I'm trying to react before it happens and anticipate it, rather than just reacting when it does.
So the options you're going to have is being able to first anticipate, and probably knowing the coworkers helps you to know what would best motivate them, and that's helpful.
And the biggest thing would be communication, making sure that everybody's on the same page, because if you have lack of communication, it makes everything take longer, and the longer it takes, the more of a problem and imbalance you have.
Absolutely.
So if you're communicating everything right as things happen, it works out a lot faster.
True. And that is a great way to adapt to that, is being able to use communication skills, and not just effective communication skills because you're good at talking, but the skill of listening and being able to communicate your message in a way where defensiveness doesn't get in the way.
Yeah, you've got to make sure that that stuff doesn't get in the way for it.
Yeah. Okay. So, how can conflict between and among employees impact the workplace? And can you think of an example when you've been in that situation?
I can't think of a time right off the top of my head where it's caused an issue for me. I'm sure it has. There are situations I've seen where, due to conflicts in the workplace, it actually stopped progress of either somebody's growing through the company or rising the ranks, or it's even affected other people, whether it's other people in the company or even possible the customers of that company, and it's caused very negative effects because one or two people's problems becomes problems for everybody else as well, and it just grows and spreads.
So when you're impacted by it and you're in the workplace where this conflict is taking place, did you read and adapt to the situation well? And how do you think you could have handled it better, looking back?
From looking back on it, it was, I mean, there's always ways to grow and adapt. one of the ways that I learned that I had to grow and adapt at that point was being a listening ear for both sides without giving too much empathy and sympathy of, oh yeah, this person did this. But it's, okay, I understand where you're coming from, but then trying to make sure that communication is still flowing properly and letting both sides know this is going to create problems for everybody else. So if you can trying to assist them in solving that problem as well as you can, because even if you're not part of it, trying to make sure that they know that it's affecting other people, and hopefully that helps them to realize it. But there's always different ways of changing with it.
Yeah. Okay. Can you anticipate being in that situation in the future? Or maybe
I'm sure
when?
it's going to keep happening over and over. When, I can't anticipate that part, because whether it's somebody's feelings getting hurt or somebody not getting what they think they should get or something taken wrong, you can never tell when it's going to happen again, but trying to make sure that an understanding is had as quickly as possible to avoid it blossoming or blooming into something much bigger is always preferred.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would think the position that you're in, where you're the trainer, so you are constantly getting an influx of a group of people all coming together with different beliefs, different, expectations of what the job should be providing for them and everything. And so you have to take this group of people, and it only takes one conflictual person that likes to stir the pot, and you're the teacher, so you have to.
And with that one, that's when you make sure in the very beginning to set up the expectations of, my biggest one is making sure here's the rules. So let's say if I'm in the room, it's here are the rules. We don't talk about this. We don't talk about this. It's about work when we're in here. Yes, we can try to become friends, but you got to keep it professional. And if anybody does take anything, whether, like you said, whether it's offensively and somebody wants to just stir the pot, it's if something's going on, come and tell me and we can settle it without everybody else getting involved in it. But it's a lot of it is taken care of when you talk about just remaining professional and enforcing those rules, because adults don't always want to listen to the rules. But yeah, making sure to enforce it. And I have had to grow and adapt to certain situations where I didn't always handle it the best the first time, because somebody might say or do something and I don't stop it, and I learned I have to take control of that.
So what I hear you saying is the options you have and how you will adapt to that in the future is you've learned I need to not let it just go on and go on. I have to set the expectation ahead of time, let them know what the framework of expectations are, and then follow up by stopping it.
And then enforce it. Yep.
Yeah. Well, those are excellent. Well, thank you very much for your help and your insights. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you.